Hello and welcome to Rediscovering You. Today, I'm so excited to introduce to you Megan Devito. Megan Devito is a life coach who empowers ambitious women to overcome stress, anxiety, and build resilience through life coaching. Megan, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and talk with you today.
This is going to be a great conversation. But
It is.
dive into what you're doing right
Mhm.
now with your coaching, I was hoping you could share a bit of your personal background and maybe your professional background as well, and what led you to be inspired to start your coaching practice.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a very small town in Northeast Indiana where, things were pretty quiet. I had the most normal childhood you could imagine. My parents still just lived like 2 miles from me. Nothing traumatic, nothing like that, but I was a sensitive kid. And I really started developing an anxiety disorder probably when I was in about the third grade. I
Wow.
remember going to school. I remember my teacher wrote this note on a sticky note and it said always sick on it. And I was like, well, that's not very nice, but I didn't want to be at school. I wanted to be at home with my parents. I don't know. I wanted to be at home. And so I felt anxious. I used to go to this little room and take naps. It was like the sick
Mhm.
room in this little school.
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm going to go lay down. I don't feel good. Hindsight, I always felt like I had an upset stomach and I was anxious, but I didn't know that. I mean, it was like at the 80s, right? Like people didn't talk about anxiety the way we do today. So we didn't really know what to do with it. So the further I got down the road, the more I noticed that it was getting worse. And, like, especially with girls, when their hormones kick in, suddenly everything feels bad. And when you're really sensitive to how your body feels, you react to it. And that's really what happened to me. So we got further down, like middle school, it got a little worse. High school, it got a little worse. College, it was like debilitating. And this went on and on until I was about 40. And all of a sudden, I just like figured it out. And yeah, that was really what happened was it was a lot of health anxiety and probably some like existential stuff, things that like weird giant volcanoes out west or things like that. Existential crisis type of things. But yeah, there was really no rhyme or reason, but I was a very anxious kid, very anxious adult.
At what point in your development were you able to, in your mind, articulate that it was anxiety that you were experiencing?
I really think it was probably maybe my junior, senior year in high school. Definitely by the time I got to college. But at that point, people weren't taking a lot of medicine. It was like the, oh, are you on Prozac thing? Where they would kind of
Mhm.
like jab at you. So anxiety wasn't widely used at that point. Therapy was not commonplace. It was kind of like, people who go to therapists, they're gonna go lay on the leather couch, like air their deepest, darkest secrets. So it wasn't what it is today, right? Like it was very much a oh, you're just being a hypochondriac or everything's going to be fine, which was totally true. I was going to be fine and I was definitely a hypochondriac. But yeah, it was really that. It was like, oh, well, I guess this is just how I am. This sucks. So
Yeah.
yeah,
For anybody that's ever experienced anxiety, you know firsthand how awful it is. And it is, as you said, it can be 100% debilitating and it impacts
hmm
all aspects of your life. And,
yeah,
I'm envious of people that haven't experienced anxiety because they don't understand and they can't always relate to it or understand, like,
right.
why don't you just snap out of it? Like, why are you choosing to do this? It is absolutely not a choice.
No, no one would choose that ever, but we do choose it sometimes, right? Like we do kind of choose it. And it really does go back to this idea of, if you're excited, it's really anxious. And if you're
Mhm.
anxious, we're just thinking about different things. So, yes, same feeling, different things. So sometimes we do choose it. We just have a different name for it.
To bring up as well. So
Yeah.
any point as you got older, because I agree with you, therapy was very rare, because you had to be really messed up to qualify for therapy.
Right. Uh,
Awful that that's
like
how it
bad
is.
things. Like you had to
Yeah.
have bad things. Yeah.
So at what point, if at any point, did you seek out treatment for yourself for your anxiety?
hmm So this is a weird question to answer because I don't have like a definitive answer, but here's what I remember. When it first started, when I was in third grade, my parents went to our family doctor, who was a good friend of theirs. This guy knew me. I was like best friends with his daughter. And so I got medicine to take, some little pill to take when my dad would go out of town on business trips, because I would be so anxious when my dad would go out of town. I don't know if they worked. I have no idea because I didn't feel any better, so they must not have. So I don't even remember taking them more than maybe like once or twice. And it was for probably, it said to help my stomach feel better, whatever that was. When I got into high school, I believe it was my junior or senior year when we finally realized, oh, hey, there's a name for this. What's going on with her? This is anxiety. My doctor, same doctor at that point, who'd known me all along, was like, hey, there's this new medicine. Let's try it. It's Zoloft. Um, Zoloft is still around. A lot of people take it. It was awful for me. Like I made get every bad side effect that you could have on an antidepressant. I 100% got those. And they just said, hey, it takes a little while to work. In the meantime, I am like dark, like going dark, right? So I think I took it for over a year. And I finally was like, I don't want to take this anymore. I'm just done. Like I quit taking it. I don't remember exactly when that was, probably maybe my freshman year in college. Um, and so I went back to nothing.
Mhm.
I think I started, and then afterwards, my mom actually got some article from a friend of hers that it was like, hey, look at all these symptoms here and how much of these things come from aspartame. So they must have been talking about me feeling anxious. And that was the first thing I did where I was like, wow, like I can tell these things happen when I eat this. So
Yeah.
whether that was causing me to have symptoms that I misinterpreted as something
Mhm.
else that made me feel more anxious, whatever it was, that was the first thing where I'm like, I can actually tell a difference if I don't chew this gum or eat this sugar-free yogurt or drink gallons of Diet Coke, whatever it was that I was doing at that point in my life, because I was just out of college, just married, and that made an actual impact. Then Lexapro came out, and I took Lexapro for on and off for about 20 years. It was amazing.
Mhm.
Like honestly, so good. Like where I was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like,
Right.
unless you take too much. And at one point, they had me on too high of a dose where I felt amazing, but I was probably manic for a really long time.
Oh no.
So my mom's like, wow, that was you. You need to like not take this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've never felt this good in my entire life. Like I am never going off this medicine. Long story short, I it end up decreasing down until I'm taking like maybe 2 milligrams a day.
Mhm.
And somebody was like, why are you even bothering you? I'm like, I don't know, you know? So, and that was at this point where I was in my recovery, but I felt like I still needed that little cushion in
Yep.
there where I was
Yep.
like, I don't know if I should let go totally, but it's been 2, 3 years. I haven't taken anything and I feel great. So, yeah, it was a
Wonderful.
very long journey with medicine. I
Yeah.
did do one short amount of time in therapy at because with air quotes because it was at the School of Psychology at Purdue, and
Mhm.
it was some sweet student who probably used me as a guinea pig, and bless her because she was trying and I was not open to it at that
Mhm.
point in my
Mhm.
life. I was going out of desperation and I didn't go very often, so not really therapy.
Okay. And so clearly your life has improved in that your anxiety, if it's not gone, it is highly managed right now and you're thriving.
100%. Oh
So
yeah.
I'm gonna take a wild guess that you've learned some actual coping mechanisms that are really helpful for you and that have empowered you
hmm
to not let anxiety overrun your life anymore. What are some
hmm
of the things that you have found are helpful for you for combating your anxiety?
The first thing for me is just to know what it is, I think.
Hmm.
And so as soon as I feel anything related to it, and I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso, but I'm obsessed with that show because it starts in the very first episode where you can see him messing with his hands and
Hmm.
just like maybe not knowing what it is. But as soon as I can recognize where it is, and for me, it always started in my hands and in my
Hmm.
forearms, which is kind of a weird place. A lot of people will say their chest or their
Right,
solar
right.
plexus or their throat. Not me, my hands and my arms. But as soon as I can recognize it coming on, I'm like, oh, gotcha. And so then it's time for me just to pay attention to, am I holding my breath right now?
Hmm.
99% of the time I'm holding my breath. I exhale and I just start by changing how I breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really my biggest thing. But I think on top of that, if you're struggling with something maybe like health anxiety, which is a little more focused on what you think is wrong,
Hmm.
there's the anxiety that goes through your body and the feeling, but then there's those thoughts that come up. It's really for me saying, oh, because I feel this, I am not allowed to believe anything that's going on up here. Like,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
any thought that I have at this point, I have to throw it in the trash. I'm not allowed to believe anything, I think, until that goes away or
Right.
calms down. And that has been like, oh, yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
But it's also coming from that feeling.
And I think what you said earlier, just being able to, when you notice a shift in your body, to recognize it and stop and pause and maybe put a
hmm
label to it as well. Because when you're able to label, hi, anxiety. Like, this is you. You're here.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
tell me something. Kind of takes away some of the power from it. At least that's my experience with it as well. And you're able to look at it a bit more objectively and look at what your body is doing more objectively. Like you said, am I holding my breath? Am I clenching my fists? Or whatever it is that is your body's way of communicating with you that there's something going on. And then you can work with that
Mm-hmm.
and work with what's
Yeah.
going on in your body and try to reverse it. So that's really, really important. Sounds simple, but
Yeah.
it has really profound impacts.
Yeah. And it's not a perfect practice, right? There are some days where I'm gonna lose. And I
Mhm.
know that. I'm gonna be like, oh, I gotta Google this right now. I have to call, I have to do the thing, but not like it used to be. I mean, now it's like, oh, really? I'm gonna have this feeling again. Most of the time, I just keep going on with my day and I'm like, oh, that feels uncomfortable and
Mhm.
whatever. And then when you don't pay attention to it, it just goes away. It's
Mhm.
just demanding attention that it doesn't need. But when you can
You're
just
not
say, oh, yeah, I know
feeding.
what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah.
like feeding it. Like if you feed
No.
into your anxiety and you allow yourself to go down the rabbit hole, then yeah, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But like, if you're able to not focus on it and put your attention elsewhere, sometimes that can be a helpful strategy as well.
Hmm.
So I know that right now in your current professional world, you are passionate about helping high achieving women overcome struggles that they might be experiencing with anxiety.
Hmm.
But I know that you didn't start there. Can you talk a little bit about what you did before your current life coaching practice and how you decided to make the shift to make the move?
Yeah, so I was a teacher for a really long time. I've taught every grade. I started out in an alternative school program for middle schoolers. I taught
Mhm.
fourth grade. I taught kindergarten, and then I went back to an alternative school setting where I stayed for on and off for about, I'd say on and off for almost 20 years, where I worked with at-risk teenagers who were really anxious. And I'm like, guys, look, I get it. Like, and this at that point in my life, I was still really underwater with
Mhm.
anxiety. It's only been I was right about 40 and I'm 49 now. So it's been 9 years-ish since I really had this huge shift in how I think about how I feel. But at that point, I was anxious right along with them. And I think we kind of like grew up together, like we were like, okay, yeah, I get you. You can just go to the bathroom for cry for a while. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be here feeling the same way when you get back. But yeah, it was so I had been in the classroom for 20 years and I knew I was ready to transition out. And at that point, and along the way, I was also coaching swim team. My kids were swimmers, and I was a swimmer, so I was coaching. And I'm like, teaching, coaching, like there's a lot of intersection there. It's not exactly the same thing by any means, but I could do that. Somewhere again, the timeline is kind of muddy in my head, but I decided I was going to get my coaching certifications,
Mhm.
and whether the crisscross is definitely there. The thing about recovering from anxiety is that you don't really know when that happened until you look backward, I think,
Yeah.
where it's like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, well, I think I was well on my way at that point
Mhm.
to feeling so much better
Mhm.
and saying, like, oh, yeah, I could really help people with this because I know how to teach. I can teach
Yeah.
them the skills, but I also know what it's like to be like anxious to the point where you can't get out of bed,
Right.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, there were days like that. So those are certainly not the people I'm working with. I'm not a therapist, but women who are trying to raise kids and start businesses or go higher and higher in their field, they're anxious and they're stressed and they have a lot of thoughts about what it means to be successful and what
Mhm.
it means to be a good mom and what it means to be a reliable employee and a team player and everything
Mhm.
else. And it's easy to get stuck in all of those thought patterns that will make you feel really anxious.
Right. And right now, are you finding what are the typical types of clients that are attracted to working with you?
Yeah, right now I would say I have a lot of people who really are like everybody wants to be perfect. And I think this is such a
Mhm.
problem. You know what I mean? Everybody sees what everyone else is doing. Like, well, I was looking and so is doing this and this person's doing this. And we certainly don't see this just in high achieving women, right? Like this is the whole middle school crowd, high school crowd, whoever it is. I mean, 30-year-olds, whoever's doing it, right? Like everybody's out there looking at what everyone else is doing because it's in our face all day long. So
Mhm.
we question how good we are and is this good enough? And how come my kid is doing this, but this kid's doing that? And so there's so much comparison out there. And I
So
think just
much.
that. And I mean, without being political, on both sides of the aisle, there's a lot of instability in the country right now where nobody knows where
Hmm.
we are, what to do, what's going to happen next. Like, am I allowed to talk to this person? Are we going to get in an argument in the grocery store line?
That's such a good point. Yes. Without being political, like you said, they just like you don't know who you can talk to about what or who you could share about
No.
what. So you're just like having this heightened sense of like fight or flight all the time. And
Yeah.
it's just pervasive in society right now.
Right. And it's 50 in Alaska and snowing in Florida and everything's crazy.
Right?
Like
What is
there's so
happening?
many things.
Hmm.
Yeah, everything is kind of upside down. And that's a lot of it is it's just a conglomerate of things, I think. It's so many things that like it's just like everything is happening at once.
This is why the work that you're doing is so important right now because it's an epidemic. It's an anxiety
Hmm.
epidemic right now. And everybody, I mean, just in my own circles as well. I mean, as being a school psychologist over the years, I'm seeing it in not only in my students, but the staff and the parents, the levels of anxiety is so high. And,
Hmm.
just even, in my own personal community, like my neighbors, friends, like people are stressing, people are worried, and
Hmm.
they're not knowing what to do with it. And if you don't have healthy coping mechanisms or know how to manage your anxiety, you know firsthand what that does. I mean, and it's not
Hmm.
pretty.
No, no, and it's a slippery slope to, bad habits and it builds fast, right? Like, I mean, I know how fast it can build. If you don't have a jump on it, and if you don't know, like, oh, here we go, I know what this is, it's going to suck you under because you will think your way down the
Mhm.
spiral very quickly.
And you brought up parents earlier, like how to be a great mom and what does that mean? And a lot of our little ones are experiencing the anxiety and coming home and
Mhm.
having these feelings. And I'm thinking of your third grade self having these big feelings and not having
Yeah.
words for it. And like there's so many children right now that are currently going through that. And how are you able to help empower parents to work with their own children on managing these
Mhm.
feelings that are likely related to anxiety?
Yeah, I would venture to say that a lot of anxious kids also have anxious parents and they came across it naturally. Only because I think that like when I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, I got you. But yeah, I think that it starts with mom, right? It starts with mom, it starts with dad and saying, hey, that's okay. Sometimes we feel like that. This is what helps me, right? Like
Mhm.
when I feel anxious, because I feel that too sometimes, and I have big scary thoughts. I think when I was in third grade, I didn't think my parents were afraid of anything. I
Mhm.
didn't think, I didn't, and you don't think that when you're a kid. And I would say even when you look at like middle schoolers, high schoolers, a lot of them are like, oh, my parents just don't get it. Swear to you, we do though, right? Like
For
we
sure.
get it.
Mhm.
And to be able to know what works for you and to say, hey, this works for me, let's try that. And then
Mhm.
I know these other little things that can also help. So if that doesn't work for you, it's not a big deal. We'll just find the thing that does. And so helping parents know how to manage their own thoughts and manage their own feelings inside of their body, whether it's regulating their emotions or, just to recognize that like, oh yeah, I don't like how this feels. I don't even know what to do. Then they can teach their kids how to do it. And really, this is the one thing after teaching for that many years, I'm like, why did we never teach that? No one is teaching people these
Mhm.
things. We're like, oh, you're alive. Go regulate yourself.
Yeah,
And
figure it out.
I mean, I never learned.
Sure, this was not taught in school, and my parents certainly didn't talk to me about managing anxiety
No.
and that. So I'm just figuring it out by myself. But I think another point that you brought up that I want to highlight is that parents, I think we can do our children a disservice by trying to portray ourselves as all knowing, all strong, nothing phases us. We're always like unshakable. I understand like the desire to want to appear strong for your kids. I definitely get that. But I think that to a fault, your kids won't see you as being human. And so when they have human emotions, they can't relate because, oh, my parents have never experienced something like this. So
Mm-hmm.
how like they can't possibly understand. So you really actually help your kids by showing them your vulnerabilities, showing them when you struggle, putting it into words, attaching language to it. Because as we said earlier,
Mm-hmm.
just putting language to an emotion can take the wind out of its sails sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, saying, okay, well, this is something that helps me when I'm having this feeling. Let's try it with you. Almost like an experiment, like we're just being
Mm-hmm.
curious. It's not bad.
Yeah. And that's what, and even if we can take the bad label off, right?
Mhm.
And if I'm coaching someone, a lot of times I'll say, okay, tell me what it feels like. And they're like, bad. It feels bad. And I'm like, yeah, it does. It feels terrible. It's really uncomfortable. But what is the emotion?
Yeah.
And they'll say it's bad. And I'm like, well, that's not really an emotion. So being like, can you actually name it? And I think so often, at least for me, I would be like, I don't know what it is, because that would cause us, we would have to really slow down
Mhm.
and be like, oh, what is this? And then we start figuring out it's not just one emotion.
Mhm.
It's not anxiety. And I know that if you get like one of the wheels or whatever, that anxiety's on there. I hate that. Like, I don't think it should be there. I think you could take this whole section and say, and these are all the emotions that can feel like when they get all warbled
Yeah.
up, this is anxiety. I don't think it's like sadness or grief or frustration or anything else. I think it's all the things
Yeah.
together.
And it's like a physical manifestation in your body too. But also one thing is as terrifying as anxiety can be when you're in the throes of it, one really positive thing to keep in mind if you struggle with anxiety is that it's highly treatable. Yeah, like there's it, and if you're working with somebody who is skilled at it, it is very quickly treatable. So you can have relief
Yeah.
very quickly. And can you talk a little bit about some of the clients and some of the experiences that you've seen with them and their growth,
Mhm.
being able to work with their feelings?
Yeah, I love that you said that it can happen really quickly because, I mean, combined with the idea that we don't know until like we look backwards to where we were,
Mhm.
it is honestly what you think about how you feel. And so often it's been conversations where they're like, nothing's working, it's not helping, it's not helping. And it takes one thought. It is literally one thought that shifts everything you think. So, I mean, I've had people that would get all the way, I've had people that it's taken them 3 weeks, 3 sessions working with me, and they're like, that's all? And I'm like, that's
Right.
all.
That's it.
That's all. Yeah, now we'll work on everything else
Yeah.
that's going on, right? Like, let's talk about the things that make that feeling come up. How do you want to reframe what you think about these different things going on? But it is like, it really is one thought about a situation or about how your body feels that changes everything. And I know for me personally, I was listening to an audiobook about manifestation, which has nothing, I was trying to become a badass and get out of the classroom. I was like, well, maybe this will give me an idea about what I would be good at. What
Yeah.
it did was it really like solidified recovery from an anxiety disorder. And
Mhm.
it was just worry is wishing for what you don't want. And I'm like, well, no one would do that. And I'm like, except me, I would do that. So it is that, but it has been one of those things for everybody where if I'm coaching, like I was coaching this woman and she's talking to me about everything. And I'm like, and she's telling me, I don't know. I just, when I get stressed out, this is what I do. I eat, or I just want to scroll on my phone, all those typical behaviors that we do. We eat our feelings. We try and make them go away. And I can't remember the exact question I asked her right now, but it was something along the line like, what would you do if you felt good? And she's like, well, this is what I would do. I'm like, well, go do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do it right now. You don't have to wait. But it is, I mean, it's different for everyone, right? It
Yeah.
really goes down to what the person's thinking about. I'm like, well, you could just go do that right now. And you
Yeah.
might be surprised at what happens. And the next week she's like, yeah, like that was it.
Yeah.
I think she was waiting for we
Right.
want it to be like some like, and ta-ta, ta-da, you're better. And it's not like that.
It's not, but and that's such a cool strategy that you did. Like, what would you do if you were feeling good? Go do that.
Go
Because
do that thing.
it's just, our thoughts and behaviors and emotions are all intertwined and they all impact. So if you change your behavior and do what you would be doing if you felt good, then it's going to naturally have a ripple effect because everything is interconnected. Your emotions are
Yeah.
going to shift to a way because your body is physically doing something that your mind is saying, this is what I would be doing if I feel good. So that your emotions are going to follow. And if you keep doing it,
Hmm.
you're building the strength, you're building the muscle. And it's like, okay, we can tackle this pretty quickly.
Yeah. And if you don't know what you would do when you would feel good now, if you're so deep in it that you're like, I have no idea. I felt bad. I felt anxious for so long. I don't know. What would you do? What did you love to do when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Like, did
Mhm.
you like to go outside and ride bikes? Did you like to go to jail? Did you like to kick the soccer ball around? Did you like to be totally submerged underwater like I did? Go do that.
Yeah.
Go be that kid. Color,
Mhm.
paint.
And I love that because, this has been coming up a lot, like talking about reconnecting with your inner child and how much there's so many benefits when we are able to reconnect and find that joy, find that fun in life. And so that is a great strategy for somebody who doesn't know like where to start or what to do. Almost everybody can think back to a memory they had as a kid or experiences they had as a kid where they felt joy, where they felt free, where they felt, as authentically them. And they're like, oh yeah, okay. Like I remember that.
Yeah.
And it's not silly if I want to go submerge myself in water like you over there.
Right.
Right? Like just do it. Do what made you feel good. And what do you have
Yeah.
to lose?
Yeah. And if it requires tap shoes or a tutu or anything else, go buy
All better.
some. I
Yes.
mean, go get yourself some tap shoes and like tap dance in your kitchen. Who cares?
Right. That's like
Yeah,
such a
it's
good
fun.
thing.
It's really, really hard to be anxious if you are tap dancing in a tutu in your kitchen. I'm telling you, you won't feel it and you've solved it. And it really is that simple. If that's your method, every single time I feel anxious, I just need to do this. Great, because you're teaching yourself how to switch gears. And
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. You don't have to carry the shoes and the tutu around with you. You just have to remember, oh, wait, all I have to do is something that feels good.
Yeah.
And it
It's so
turns
funny.
off.
Dave, I use it with my own son, because he struggles with anxiety sometimes. And so
Uh-huh.
one thing that I do try to be silly with him is I'll be like, okay, we're gonna skip together because it's really hard to sulk and cry and have a frown on our face
Yes.
if we're skipping. So literally
Yep.
we will start skipping and then trying to
It's
keep our
true.
face in a frown and we both end up just cracking up because
Yeah.
anybody listening, try it. Try skipping and frowning and sulking, and you can't do it. I'm telling you, it's not
No,
natural.
you can't. It is, and it's just that simple. And yes, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to go away and never come back, right? But now you have one thing that you know that works. Okay, well, what's something else that would feel good? Like maybe it's even like I just want to sit in the sun sit with the sun on my face. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be anything, but movement is magic.
It's so
I
it.
mean,
Yes.
yeah.
All of that. So, Megan, if people are interested in learning more about what they do, how can they find you? What else are you doing?
Mhm.
And by the way, I think you have a podcast that you also host. Would
I
you like to
do
talk
have
about
a
that a little bit?
podcast. Sure. Yeah, I have a
Okay.
podcast. It's called More Than Anxiety. It's on all the podcast places. You can find it there. So I have 120 some episodes out there, and they're all about different ways that anxiety shows up. I mean, for parents, for individuals, for, women in corporate settings. I've got one on men's mental health that's amazing. I love that episode because I think guys can use this. This is
Mhm.
not specific to women. I mean, I coach women, but this stuff works for guys too. I've coached guys. It's not a like, well, guys, this won't work. It will. So yeah, I've got a podcast. I also am just getting ready to launch my first group, which is super fun. All of my coaching up until this time has been one-on-one. That's still going to be there. But now I have an option for people who are like, I just need to know some other people who get it. And I want this to be fun and I want it to be super flexible. So that's going to launch. It was supposed to be the first week in February. I think it's going to get pushed out to the second week now. And it's just going to be always open. You can join anytime you want. It's a membership. I'm going to have a weekly lesson where I get to be my teacher self. And I'll go on and I'll teach you guys a lesson about anxiety or your nervous system or whatever else comes up for the week. I have a long list of things to talk about. And then I'm going to have another day where we go live and we do group coaching, and you can bring whatever you need coached on for the week. We can talk about the lesson. We can talk about what happened at home or at work, and you can bring all of that there. And then we're going to do like Fun Friday where we'll do celebrations. So there'll be a community where you can talk with other people in the group, where you can text, where you can share celebrations. And oh my gosh, this is happening and I'm losing it right now. And then, it'll grow from there. But that will launch in February. So I have three things all of a sudden. I have
Oh
a
my
podcast, a
goodness.
group, and one-on-one, which is like a lot. It feels a lot different than what it is right now. Really, I'm adding a group. So
This is so exciting. I love that you're launching a group because there's
I
so much
am.
power in community and working together and learning from one
Yeah.
another and gaining support from each other. This is awesome. I'm so excited for you.
Good.
If they're interested, like, I want to be a part of that. How can they sign up for
Yeah.
it?
It'll be on my website. It's at megandevito.com. The link as of today, when we're recording this, is putting the group. I hired someone to do my website because Lord knows I can't do that. So she is putting the group together, and I should have the link active and up by the time this podcast airs, I bet. So there will be a link to the group on there. You can also find out more about my podcast on there and all of the resources I have. And you can sign up get my weekly email, all of the things just in that one spot. Just go to my website and check the tabs at the top. It's all up there.
Beautiful. And I will include all of
Yeah.
that in the episode notes to make it
Thank
super
you.
easy. Megan, it has been such a joy talking with you. This has been such a fun conversation, and I'm so excited for all the cool things that you have coming your way.
Thank you. I am too. Very excited. Thanks for having me.
Of course.